The marble conference room went dead silent when Adrian Moretti slammed the contract down in front of the trembling office assistant and snarled, "If you're so smart, sweetheart, then translate it." He laughed. The executives laughed. Nina Whitmore picked up the document with steady hands. 3 minutes later, nobody was laughing anymore. Adrian's face had gone white as paper. If you love stories where the underestimated woman destroys the powerful man who mocked her, please subscribe to our channel and stay until the very end. And drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I read every single one. Nina Whitmore had learned a long time ago that being invisible was a kind of armor. At 26 years old, she walked through the gleaming lobby of Moretti Imports and Logistics every morning at exactly 6:45, 15 minutes before anyone important arrived. She wore the same 3 blazers in rotation, kept her chestnut hair pulled back in a low knot, and never ever made eye contact with the men in the $1,000 suits. That was the rule. Her supervisor, Margaret, had spelled it out on her first day 8 months ago. "You're a temp, honey. Part-time. You serve coffee, you file paperwork, you smile, and you keep your mouth shut. The men on the 32nd floor don't want to hear your opinions. They want their espresso hot and their lives uncomplicated." Got it. Nina had nodded. She needed the paycheck. Her father's medical bills weren't going to pay themselves, and the linguistics adjunct work she picked up at the community college didn't even cover her rent. So she became invisible. She memorized which executive took 2 sugars and which one took oat milk. She learned that Mr. Donovan from accounting always wanted his bagel toasted on one side only. She figured out how to slip into a room refill 12 crystal water glasses and slip out again without a single person noticing she existed. It was, she had to admit, a little soul-crushing. But on this particular Tuesday morning in late October, the soul-crushing routine was about to crack wide open. She was standing at the kitchenette arranging a tray of imported pastries for the 8 o'clock board meeting when she heard Margaret's heels clicking down the corridor at a panicked pace. Nina, where are you?" "In here." Margaret rounded the corner, her face flushed, her clipboard pressed against her chest like a shield. "Change of plans. Carla called in sick. You're covering the Moretti meeting." Nina's hand froze around the silver tongs. "The Moretti meeting, you mean?" "Yes, the big one. Mr. Moretti himself. The Italian delegation flew in last night, and they're signing something major today." Margaret was already pushing the tray toward her. "Just keep the coffee flowing. Don't speak unless someone speaks to you. And for the love of God, don't drop anything." "Margaret, I've never been in a room with him before." "You've seen him in the elevator. You've seen the way he looks at people. Just remember, he's not a man you want to be noticed by. Be a ghost. You hear me? A ghost." Nina's pulse had started to drum in her throat. She'd seen Adrian Moretti exactly twice in her 8 months at the company. The first time he'd stepped into the elevator with 3 men in dark suits, and the temperature in that elevator had dropped about 10 degrees. He hadn't said a word. He hadn't needed to. Everyone else had simply stopped breathing until he stepped out. The second time, she'd been crossing the lobby with a delivery, and she'd accidentally made eye contact with him. Just for a half second, his eyes were the color of charcoal dark level, completely unreadable, and they had landed on her with the same emotional weight as if he were noting the position of a piece of furniture. She had almost dropped the delivery. Now she was supposed to walk into a room with him, with 12 men like him, and not be noticed. "Margaret, are you sure I'm—" "Just go, Nina. The meeting starts in 7 minutes." Nina picked up the tray. Her hands were shaking just slightly, just enough that the cups rattled against their saucers. She took a slow breath the way her father had taught her to breathe before a difficult oral exam. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Find the rhythm of your own heart. She walked. The conference room on the 32nd floor was bigger than her entire apartment. The ceiling was 20 feet high. The windows looked out over the entire city, and the morning sun was hitting the glass in such a way that the room glowed like the inside of a cathedral. Nina kept her head down. She placed the tray on the side table. She began arranging the cups. The Italian delegation had already arrived. 6 men, all of them in their 60s, all of them wearing watches that probably cost more than her car. They were speaking in low, rapid Italian, which Nina happened to understand fluently. Her grandmother had been from Naples, and her father had insisted she keep up the language. But she gave no sign of comprehension. She just poured espresso and kept her eyes on the rim of the cup. Then Adrian walked in. Nina felt his presence before she saw him. The whole room shifted. Conversations died in mid-sentence. The Italian men actually stood up, which in business culture was the equivalent of bowing. Adrian Moretti was 34 years old. He had black hair cut close on the sides, a jaw that looked like it had been carved out of stone, and the kind of stillness that only very dangerous men ever managed to perfect. He moved through the room without hurrying. He sat down at the head of the table. He didn't look at Nina. She poured his espresso. 2 sugars, no cream. "Gentlemen," he said in a voice that was lower and softer than she'd expected, "let's begin." For the next 40 minutes, Nina stood against the wall and tried to disappear into the wallpaper. The meeting was about a port acquisition in Genoa. That much was clear from context. The Italian men had brought a contract 43 pages single-spaced in legal Italian, and they wanted Adrian to sign it. Adrian's attorney, a sharp-faced woman named Vivian, had a translated English version in front of her. She kept tapping the 3rd page and frowning. "The translation services have given us this version," Vivian was saying, "but there are 3 clauses I'm not entirely comfortable with. Clauses 17, 22, and 31. I'd like to bring in an outside linguist before we sign." Adrian's jaw tightened. "Vivian, the signing is today. The plane back to Milan leaves at 4. "I understand, sir, but the language here, what does it say?" "In English, it appears to say that we're acquiring a 60% stake in the Genoa terminal with full operational control. But the Italian phrasing in Clause 17 has a turn of phrase I don't recognize. Subordinato a. It usually means subject to, but in some legal dialects it can imply the senior Italian man. A silver-haired gentleman named Signor Bertolini smiled benevolently and said something in Italian to his colleagues. Nina, standing 5 feet behind him with a coffee pot in her hand, and understood every word. He had said, "The American doesn't read Italian. By the time he understands what he signed, the ships will already be ours." The other Italians had chuckled. Nina's hand tightened on the handle of the coffee pot. She felt the blood rise into her face. She felt something else too. Something hot and slow-burning that she hadn't felt in a long time. Her father called it the burn. The thing that happened when you watched someone get cheated and you knew the truth and you couldn't stay quiet. She tried to stay quiet. She really did. Vivian was still talking. "Sir, I'm asking for 48 hours to bring in a forensic translator. Just 48 hours." Adrian leaned back in his chair. His eyes were dark and tired. "Vivian, this deal has been on the table for 9 months. We don't have 48 hours. Signor Bertolini spread his hands and smiled. "Mr. Moretti, please. We are gentlemen. The contract is exactly as the translation states. You have my word." Nina, still holding the coffee pot, looked at her shoes. "Don't," she told herself, "don't say a word. You will lose your job. You will lose the medical insurance. You will not be able to afford your father's neurologist next month. Do not. Open your mouth." And then Adrian did the thing. He turned his head, just slightly, just enough to glance at the woman standing against the wall holding the coffee pot. His eyes were sharp and amused and a little bit cruel. "You," he said. Nina froze. "Sir." "What's your name?" "Nina, sir. Nina Whitmore." "Nina," he said the name like he was tasting it. "You've been standing there with your eyebrows up for the last 5 minutes. You look like you have an opinion." The room went very still. Vivian shot her a look of pure horror. The Italians turned in their chairs, surprised, looking at Nina for the first time. Nina forced herself to smile. I don't have an opinion, sir. I'm just here to pour the coffee." Adrian's mouth did something that wasn't quite a smile. "Are you sure?" "Quite sure, sir. Because I could swear just for a moment, when Signor Bertolini was speaking, you looked like you understood him." The Italian shifted uncomfortably. Nina's heart was pounding so hard she was afraid he could hear it. "Sir, my Italian is very limited." "How limited?" I took some classes in college." Adrian leaned forward. Now he was watching her the way a cat watches something small. "Tell me, Nina Whitmore, do you read Italian?" "A little, sir." "A little." He picked up his copy of the contract. He held it out to her across the table. "Then come here. Translate Clause 17 for me." The room was so silent Nina could hear the building's air conditioning humming. Vivian was making subtle urgent gestures at her, mouthing the word no. The senior Italian Signor Bertolini had gone slightly pale. Nina did not move. Sir, she said, I'm not qualified to... I'm not asking if you're qualified, Nina. Adrian's voice was quiet, almost gentle. I'm asking you to translate. 3 sentences. That's all. He smiled. If you're so smart, sweetheart, then translate it. He laughed. Not a kind laugh, a short, contemptuous laugh, the kind of laugh a man uses when he wants to remind the room who is the king and who is the cleaning staff. The other men at the table laughed too in that nervous, automatic way that men laugh when the boss laughs. Nina felt her face burn. She set down the coffee pot on the side table. She walked very slowly to the head of the long mahogany conference table. She took the contract from his outstretched hand. Her fingers were steady now. She had no idea why. Maybe because once you're already humiliated, there's nothing left to be afraid of. She turned to clause 17. She read it once in Italian silently. She read it again. She felt her throat go tight. Mr. Moretti, she said, would you like the literal translation or the honest one? The smile slid off Adrian's face. What did you say? I said, Nina repeated in the calm, precise voice she used when she lectured undergraduates. Would you like the literal translation or the honest one? They are not the same thing. Vivienne's mouth had fallen open. Signor Bertolini had gone from pale to gray. Adrian stared at Nina for a long moment. Something had changed in his eyes. The cruel amusement was gone. In its place was something sharper. Something almost interested. Both, he said quietly. Give me both. Nina nodded. She held up the page. The literal translation reads as follows. The buyer shall acquire 60% of the operational shares in the Port of Genoa terminal facility, subject to the continued cooperation of the existing managerial board. She paused. That is what your English translator wrote. That is what your attorney has been reading. That is what Signor Bertolini is asking you to sign. Adrian's jaw flexed. And the honest translation? Ian. Nina looked down at the page. She looked up at him. The honest translation, Mr. Moretti, is this. The buyer shall acquire 60% of the operational shares of the Port of Genoa terminal facility. However, she let the word hang in the air. However, this acquisition shall be subordinate to the continued goodwill of the existing managerial board, who retain the unilateral authority to revoke operational control at any time for any reason without compensation and without recourse. Silence. Absolute ringing silence. Nina kept her eyes on the contract. She didn't dare look at Signor Bertolini. She didn't dare look at Adrian. In other words, sir, she said, the word you've translated as cooperation is cooperazione. But the word actually used in this clause is benevolenza. Goodwill. It's a deliberate choice. Cooperazione implies a contractual obligation. Benevolenza implies a favor that can be withdrawn at the discretion of the giver. You're not buying 60% of a port. You're buying 60% of a permission slip. They can take it back anytime they want. The silence in the room had changed quality. It was no longer the silence of a meeting. It was the silence of a courtroom waiting for a verdict. Adrian did not move. He didn't blink. He just looked at Nina Whitmore. Nina the coffee girl. Nina the temp. Nina the invisible, as if he had never actually seen another human being in his life until this exact second. Continue, he said softly. Sir, clause 22, read it. Nina's hands trembled just barely. She turned the page. She found clause 22. She read it, and what she read made the skin on her arms go cold. Mr. Moretti, she said slowly, before I read this one out loud, are you sure you want me to? I'm sure. Sir, this clause, Nina hesitated. She glanced for the first time at Signor Bertolini. The old Italian gentleman was no longer smiling. He was looking at Nina with an expression that contained no warmth, no benevolence, no goodwill. It was the look of a man watching a small animal walk in front of a moving truck. In Italian, very softly, so softly that only Nina could hear, he said, Ragazza, sta attenta a quello che dici. Girl, be careful what you say. Nina's spine went rigid. She turned back to Adrian Moretti. She held his gaze. And for the first time in 8 months of being invisible, she let someone actually see her. Sir, she said, clause 22 specifies the terms of dispute resolution. The English translation states that any disputes will be resolved by an independent arbitrator in a neutral jurisdiction. Yes, The Italian text says un arbitro neutrale di nostra scelta. Translate, a neutral arbitrator of our choice, their choice. Not a mutually agreed party, not an independent body, a judge they pick, in a city they pick, under laws they pick. She set the contract down on the table. Her hands were perfectly still now. Her voice was perfectly level. Mr. Moretti, this isn't a contract. This is a trap. You sign this and within 6 months you'll have paid them $400 million for a port you don't actually own, that you can't actually operate with a dispute clause that prevents you from suing them in any court that would rule fairly. You'll be locked out, you'll be silenced, and you'll have no legal recourse anywhere on earth. Adrian Moretti did not move a single muscle. The Italian men were looking at each other. Signor Bertolini had laid both hands flat on the conference table. Nina took a small step back from the table. She didn't know what she had just done. She only knew that she had done it, and there was no taking it back, and her father had taught her many things, but he had never taught her how to walk back into being invisible after a moment like this. That's all, sir, she said quietly. That's clause 22. Vivian had not breathed in approximately 90 seconds. Adrian finally moved. He lifted one hand. He pressed his fingertips against his mouth slowly, the way a man does when he is making a very serious decision in real time. He did not look at the Italians. He did not look at Vivian. He did not look at the contract. He looked at Nina. And in that look, Nina Whitmore understood with a sinking electric certainty that something in her life had just irrevocably changed. She had spent 8 months making sure this man never noticed her existed. He was noticing her now. He was noticing her completely. Signor Bertolini, Adrian said without taking his eyes off Nina, I think we'll be postponing today's signing. Bertolini began to protest in rapid Italian. Adrian held up one finger. Just one. And the old man stopped talking. I'd like everyone except Miss Whitmore to leave this room, Adrian said. His voice was very quiet. Right now, please. Vivian stood up slowly, gathering her papers. The Italian delegation rose more slowly still, their faces tight with anger and something that might have been fear. Signor Bertolini was the last to leave. As he passed Nina, he leaned in close enough that she could smell his cologne, and he murmured in Italian 4 words that her father had taught her never to forget the meaning of. You have made enemies. Then he was gone, and the heavy mahogany door closed behind him with a soft final click. Nina was alone in the conference room with Adrian Moretti. He was still sitting at the head of the table. He was still watching her with that strange, sharp, completely unfamiliar expression. He gestured slowly to the chair beside him. Miss Whitmore, he said, sit down. Nina did not sit. Sir, she said, if I'm going to be fired, I'd rather just sit down, Nina. His voice wasn't loud, it wasn't unkind, but it had iron in it, and Nina felt her knees move before her brain made the decision. She sat. Adrian Moretti studied her in silence for a long, long moment. Long enough that the city outside the window seemed to dim. Long enough that Nina could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. Then finally he leaned forward. He folded his hands on the polished wood, and in the softest voice she had ever heard him use, he asked her one single question. Now, he said, who exactly are you? Nina's mouth went dry. She had practiced over the past 8 months an entire repertoire of safe answers. Answers that revealed nothing. Answers that kept her invisible. I'm just a temp, sir. I'm just here to help. But Adrian Moretti was watching her with an attention so total, so undivided that she understood instinctively that none of those answers would work on him. He would see through them in a single breath. He had built an empire by seeing through people. So she told him the truth. My name is Nina Whitmore, she said. I'm 26. I have a master's degree in comparative linguistics from Columbia. I speak 6 languages fluently, and I read 3 more. I'm working as a coffee girl in your office because my father has early onset Parkinson's, and his medications cost $4,000 a month, and the adjunct teaching jobs I qualify for don't come with health insurance. She paused. She made herself meet his eyes. That's who I am, sir. Adrian did not react. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He just absorbed the information the way a stone absorbs rain. 6 languages, he repeated. Yes, sir. Which ones? English, Italian, French, German, Spanish, and Russian. And the 3 you read, Latin, Mandarin, and Arabic, but only formal written Arabic, not conversational. Adrian's mouth twitched. It wasn't a smile exactly. It was something closer to recognition, the way a hunter recognizes a track in the snow. Columbia, he said. Master's degree. Yes, sir. Why are you carrying a coffee tray in my building, Miss Whitmore? Nina felt her throat tighten. She had been asked this question in various forms by various well-meaning people for 2 years now. She had a polite answer. She gave it. Because the academic job market collapsed in 2023, sir. Because tenure-track positions in the humanities have a 5% acceptance rate, and most of them require a PhD. Because I had to choose between finishing my doctorate and paying for my father's neurologist, and I chose my father. She heard her voice catch just slightly on the last word. She hated that. She straightened her shoulders. It's not a tragedy, sir. People make harder choices every day. Adrian said nothing for a long moment. Then he stood up. He walked slowly to the window. He stood with his back to her, his hands in his pockets looking down at the city below. Nina did not know what he was thinking. She did not know if she was about to be seared or arrested or simply forgotten. She sat very still and waited. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, quieter, more careful. Miss Whitmore, do you understand what you just did? Sir, in that meeting, do you understand what you just did? Nina hesitated. I told you the truth about the contract, sir. You did more than that. Adrian turned slowly to face her. You just cost the Bertolini family approximately $400 million in 10 minutes with a coffee pot in your hand. Nina's stomach dropped. Sir, I didn't mean to. I'm not angry, Miss Whitmore. You're not. No. Adrian walked back toward the table. He sat down, not at the head this time, but in the chair directly across from her. He folded his hands. I'm trying to decide what to do with you. The way he said it made Nina's skin go cold. She had grown up hearing her father quote a line from an old Italian play. The dangerous men are not the ones who shout. The dangerous men are the ones who think. Adrian Moretti at this moment was thinking, and his thinking had a weight to it that filled the entire room. Sir, Nina said carefully, if you'd like me to resign, I understand. I can clean out my locker today, and I don't want you to resign. Sir, I want you to tell me, he said, exactly how you knew. Nina swallowed. How I knew what, sir, how you knew about benevolenza, how you knew about the arbitrator clause. Vivienne is one of the best corporate attorneys in the country. She has 14 years of experience. She missed it. The translation service, we paid $200,000 to missed it. You, a woman carrying a coffee tray, caught it in under a minute. How? Nina took a slow breath. She thought of her father. She thought of the small, cluttered apartment in Queens where she had grown up. She thought of the long evenings at the kitchen table, her father in his cardigan, his glasses sliding down his nose, a stack of legal documents spread out between them. My father is a linguist, sir, she said, was a linguist. He taught at NYU for 30 years. His specialty was forensic semantics. Forensic semantics. The study of how language is used to deceive, specifically in legal and contractual contexts. He was an expert witness in over 200 court cases. He testified for the prosecution in the Donato fraud case in 2014. He testified for the defense in the Marcellus inheritance dispute in 2018. Adrian's eyes narrowed very slightly. Frank Whitmore is your father. Nina blinked. You've heard of him. Miss Whitmore, Adrian said dryly, your father testified against my uncle in the Marcellus case. The blood drained from Nina's face. Oh, she said. For one long, terrible second, Nina thought she might actually faint. Her father had never told her about the Moretti family. He had never mentioned Adrian's uncle. He had never said the words. She had taken this job because it was the first one that called her back. She had walked blind and grateful into the offices of a family her father had testified against, and she had spent 8 months pouring coffee for the nephew of a man her father had helped put behind bars. And now she had publicly humiliated that nephew's business partners. In front of him, in his own conference room. Mr. Moretti, she whispered, I swear to you, I didn't know. I would never have applied here if I... Sit down, Miss Whitmore. Sir, sit down. She sat. She had never actually stood up. She sat anyway more firmly, as if pressing herself into the chair could keep her from disappearing entirely. Adrian watched her for another long moment, and then to her absolute astonishment, he laughed. It was a small laugh, dry and surprised, the laugh of a man who had been ambushed by his own day. He shook his head. Of all the women in New York, he said, the daughter of Frank Whitmore is carrying my coffee. Sir, I'll resign immediately. I never meant to. You will not resign. But, sir, Miss Whitmore. Adrian leaned forward, his charcoal eyes locked onto hers. Whatever your father did or did not do to my uncle is between him and the federal court system. It has nothing to do with you. And it has nothing to do with the fact that you just saved me $400 million. Nina's mouth was open. She closed it. Now, Adrian continued, I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to answer carefully. Do you want to keep working for me? Sir, I need this job, but that's not what I asked. Sir, I asked if you want to keep working for me, not if you need the money. I know you need the money. I'm asking you, Nina. And her name in his mouth had a strange, deliberate weight, as if he had decided somewhere in the last 10 minutes that he was going to use it from now on. If you want to keep working for me. She looked at him. 8 months of invisibility crashed against the moment like a wave hitting a seawall. She thought of Margaret, who had told her to be a ghost. She thought of the Italian man's words in her ear. You have made enemies. She thought of her father asleep right now in their tiny apartment, a tremor running through his right hand, even as he dreamed. Sir, she said carefully, I don't think want is the right word. Then what's the right word? I think the word is willing. I'm willing to keep working for you, if the work is honest. Something flickered in Adrian Moretti's eyes. It was gone almost before she could catch it. But for 1/2 second, she saw something she had not expected to see. Surprise. And maybe a flicker of respect. Honest, he repeated. Yes, sir. And what does honest work mean to you, Miss Whitmore? It means I won't lie for you, sir. I won't translate things to mean what you want them to mean. I'll tell you what they actually say, went I, even when you don't want to hear it, especially then. Adrian stared at her. For one cold, terrible second, Nina was sure she had gone too far. Then he leaned back in his chair slowly, and a real smile, the first real one she had seen from him, spread across his face. It was not a warm smile. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a man who had just found a tool he had been looking for a very long time. Miss Whitmore, he said softly, you are going to be very useful to me. The way he said the word useful made Nina's spine prickle. He pressed a small button on the underside of the conference table. Somewhere outside the room, a door opened. Vivienne, the attorney, walked back in her face tight, her eyes flicking between Nina and Adrian with poorly disguised confusion. Sir, Vivienne said. Vivienne, effective immediately, Miss Whitmore is no longer a temporary office assistant. She is being promoted to my personal corporate translator. She will report directly to me. She will sit in on every contract negotiation involving non-English documentation. Her salary is to be tripled starting today, and she is to be given full health benefits for herself and one dependent. Vivienne's mouth opened slightly. Sir, of course, but the chain of command. There is no chain of command, Vivienne. She reports to me, only me. Is that clear? Yes, sir. Good. Now find me Bertolini's hotel. I'd like to send him a very polite gift basket and a very impolite letter. Miss Whitmore will be drafting both. Vivienne nodded crisply and left. The door closed. Nina was alone with him again. Sir, she said quietly, I appreciate the promotion, I do. But I'd like to be clear about what I am and am not willing to do. Go on. I will translate for you. I will tell you what the documents actually say. I will tell you when people are lying, but I will not deceive on your behalf. I won't write contracts designed to trap people. I won't be a weapon, sir. I'll be a mirror. There's a difference. She had no idea where the courage was coming from. Her hands under the table were shaking, but her voice was steady. Adrian looked at her for a long, considering moment. A mirror, he repeated. Yes, sir. Miss Whitmore, do you understand the kind of business I am in? I have an idea, sir. Tell me. Nina hesitated. She thought of her father's testimony in the Marcellus case. She thought of the rumors that drifted through the office like cigarette smoke. She thought of the men in dark suits in the elevator. I think you do many things, sir. Most of them are legal. Some of them are not. I don't ask. I don't want to know. I just want to do my work. Adrian laughed again, that small, dry laugh. An honest mirror that knows when not to look. You really are your father's daughter. Yes, sir, Nina said. I really am. He tilted his head. And if I asked you to compromise that just once, just on something small, then I would say no, sir. And if I made the consequences of saying no very, very expensive, Nina felt the air go thin. She thought of her father. She thought of his medications. She thought of the way his hand trembled around his morning coffee cup. She thought of the small mercies, the second-hand armchair. He loved the radio. He listened to the book she still read aloud to him on Sunday afternoons because his eyes got tired so quickly now. She thought of all of it, and then she answered, "Then I would still say no, sir, and I would walk out of this building, and I would find another job. It might be a worse job, but it would still be mine." Silence. Adrian Moretti studied her with the kind of patient, calculating attention that had probably ended marriages and broken men. Nina did not look away. Finally, he nodded. "Very well," he said. "An honest mirror. A no, that means no. I accept your terms, Miss Whitmore, for now." He stood up. The meeting evidently was over. "Vivian will arrange your new office and your new contract. Be back here at 2 o'clock this afternoon. We have work to do." "Yes, sir." She rose. She turned to leave. She was almost at the door when his voice stopped her. "Nina," she turned. "I knew you understood Italian," he said softly from the moment Bertolini made his joke. Your face moved, just a little, just for a second. Most people would have missed it. I didn't. Nina's stomach turned over. "Why did you make me prove it then, sir?" she asked. "Why didn't you just ask me?" Adrian smiled. It was a thin knife-edged smile. "Because I needed to see Miss Whitmore what kind of woman you are when a powerful man laughs at you in a room full of his subordinates. I needed to see if you would shrink, or if you would cut." He picked up his coffee cup. He took a slow sip. "You cut. That's good. That's exactly what I needed to know." He set the cup down. "Welcome to your new job, Miss Whitmore." Nina walked out of the conference room on legs that did not entirely feel like her own. The corridor was empty. The Italian delegation had been escorted from the building. Vivian was nowhere in sight. Nina made it to the elevator, pressed the button, and stood waiting in the silence with her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her teeth. When the elevator arrived, she stepped inside. She pressed the button for the lobby. She watched the numbers count down, 32, 31, 30, and somewhere around floor 28, the full weight of what had just happened landed on her. She had a real job now, a real salary, health insurance. Her father's medications would no longer be a monthly emergency. She could afford his neurologist. She could afford a new wheelchair. She could afford to breathe. She had also, in the span of one morning, become the personal asset of a man who watched people the way other men watch chess pieces. A man who had tested her with public humiliation just to see if she would break. A man whose uncle her father had testified against in federal court. She thought about Bertolini's words, "You have made enemies." She thought about Adrian's words, "I'm trying to decide what to do with you." She was halfway across the lobby when her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a text from a number she did not recognize. "Welcome to your new role, Miss Whitmore. Car will pick you up tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock sharp. Be ready." A.M. Nina stared at the screen. Her hand was shaking again, but for a different reason now. She typed back, "How did you get this number, sir?" 3 dots appeared instantly. Then a reply, "I had it before you walked into the meeting this morning." Nina read the message 3 times. The lobby felt colder than it had a moment ago. She put the phone away. She walked out of the building. The October air hit her face cold and bright, and for a long minute she just stood on the sidewalk watching the yellow cabs roll past, trying to slow her own breathing. Her father's voice came back to her then, the way it always did when she needed it. Something he had said to her years ago when she was struggling through a difficult case study in his office at NYU. "Nina, listen to me. Powerful men do not give power away, they lend it. And the moment you forget that you become their property, promise me you'll remember." She had promised. She had promised at 14, sitting on his desk in her school uniform, swinging her legs. She had promised at 22, the day she'd accepted her first real job. And she promised again now, standing on the sidewalk outside Moretti Imports and Logistics on the strangest morning of her adult life. She closed her eyes. She breathed in. She breathed out. "I remember, Dad. I remember." When she got home that night, her father was awake. He was sitting in his armchair by the window, the way he always was, a book open on his lap that he had probably stopped reading hours ago because his eyes had gotten tired. "Nina Bear," he said when he saw her face, "what happened?" She set down her bag. She knelt beside his chair. She took his trembling hand in hers. "Dad," she said, "I think I just got promoted." "That's wonderful, sweetheart. Where to?" She looked at him, at his thinning gray hair, at the soft, tired blue eyes that had taught her all her life how to read between the lines. "Dad," she said carefully, "have you ever heard of the Moretti family?" The book slid very slowly off her father's lap and hit the floor. He didn't pick it up. "Nina," he said in a voice that was suddenly not tired at all. "Nina, what have you done?" Nina did not move. Her hand stayed wrapped around her father's, and she could feel the small, constant tremor of his fingers against her palm. "Dad," she said carefully, "what do you mean, what have I done?" Frank Whitmore looked at his daughter for a long time. His blue eyes, which had been soft and tired a moment ago, were sharp now. Sharp in a way Nina had not seen them in years, not since the last time he had taken the witness stand. "Nina Bear, tell me exactly what happened today. Don't leave anything out." So she told him. She told him about the meeting, about Bertolini's joke in Italian, about the contract, about the way Adrian Moretti had laughed at her and the way she had not been able to stay quiet. She told him about benevolenza. She told him about Clause 22. She told him about the way the room had gone silent and the way Adrian had said her name like he was tasting it. She told him about the promotion, the triple salary, the health benefits. And she told him about the text message and the line that had stopped her cold on the sidewalk. "I had it before you walked into the meeting this morning." Frank Whitmore listened to all of it without saying a word. When she was finished, he sat back in his armchair, and he closed his eyes, and he was silent for so long that Nina began to wonder if he had fallen asleep. Then very quietly he said, "Get me my address book, the leather one, in the bottom drawer of my desk." "Dad." "Just get it, Nina." She went into his small study. She pulled open the bottom drawer. The leather address book was wedged underneath a stack of old academic papers. She brought it back. He took it with both hands. His tremor made the pages flutter. He thumbed through it slowly until he found a page near the back. He pulled out a single piece of paper that had been folded twice into a small square. "Dad, what is that?" "Sit down, Nina." She sat on the ottoman in front of his chair. He unfolded the paper. It was a photograph, black and white, old, probably from the early 2000s. It showed three men standing in front of a building Nina did not recognize. One of them was much younger, but unmistakably her father. The man in the middle was older, heavy-set, with thick silver hair. The third man on the right was tall and thin and wearing a dark coat. "This was taken in 2007, her father said quietly. "The man in the middle is Carmine Moretti. He was the head of the Moretti family at the time. The man on the right is his younger brother, Lorenzo. Lorenzo's son, Adrian, would have been about 15 years old when this picture was taken." Nina stared at the photograph. "You knew his father." "I knew his father very well, Nina. Lorenzo Moretti was my friend." "Your friend?" "For 7 years, from 2003 to 2010. Nina felt the floor tilt slightly under her feet. "Dad, you've never told me any of this." "There's a reason for that, sweetheart." "What reason?" Frank Whitmore looked at her for a long moment. Then he refolded the photograph slowly and slid it back into the address book. "Lorenzo Moretti hired me in 2003 to consult on his contracts. He was the only one in his family who actually wanted his deals to be clean. He was the lawyer of the family, the one who kept everything legal, the one who pushed back against his older brother. He paid me to read every major Moretti contract from 2003 to 2010 and to flag anything that looked dishonest. Most of what I flagged came from Carmine. Lorenzo would push back and Carmine would back down. That was how the family worked. The older brother had the power, but the younger brother had the brains. What happened in 2010? Lorenzo died, Nina. How close? A car accident on the West Side Highway. They said the brakes failed." Nina's stomach tightened. "Dad, I know what you're thinking. I thought it too. I never had any proof. But Lorenzo had been pushing back hard against Carmine that year, and 3 months before he died, he told me he was thinking of taking the family in a different direction, a legal direction. He said his son Adrian was going to inherit everything someday, and he didn't want Adrian to inherit a war. And then he died. And then he died." Frank's voice was very quiet. "And 4 years later, Carmine got tangled up in the Marcellus inheritance dispute, and the prosecution called me to the stand because I had the documentation. Every Moretti contract from 2003 to 2010 had passed through my hands. I had notes on all of it. I had to testify Nina. The subpoena left me no choice. Did Carmine go to prison? He did, 8 years. He died there in 2019. Nina pressed her hands against her temples. She felt like the room was spinning very slowly around her. Dad, Adrian Moretti, the man I'm working for, does he know who you are? Nina Bear, of course he knows. How do you know that? Because Adrian Moretti is Lorenzo's son, and Lorenzo loved that boy more than anything in this world. Lorenzo used to bring Adrian to my office when he was a teenager. He would sit in the corner and read while we worked. He was a quiet, smart boy with sad eyes. He knew me, Nina. He knew my face. He knew my name. And he certainly knows your last name. The floor was no longer tilting. The floor had simply dropped out from underneath her entirely. You're telling me, Nina whispered, that Adrian Moretti hired me on purpose. I'm telling you that no man like Adrian Moretti accidentally hires the daughter of Frank Whitmore, Nina. And no man like Adrian Moretti has your phone number before you walk into a meeting. He's been watching you. Probably for months. Nina's hands had started to shake. Why? Why would he do that? That, sweetheart, is what we need to figure out, and quickly. Frank Whitmore set the address book on the side table. He took both of his daughter's hands in his. His grip was weaker than it used to be, but it was firm enough to steady her. Nina, I need you to listen to me very carefully. There are 2 possibilities here. Okay? The first possibility is that Adrian hired you because he wanted to keep an enemy close. His father's friend's daughter working for the man whose uncle my testimony helped imprison. He wants to know what you know. He wants to know what you might do. He wants leverage. And the second possibility, Frank's eyes softened just slightly. The second possibility is that Adrian hired you because you are the only person in his world who has a connection to his father. The good father, the one who loved him, the one who tried to make things clean before the brakes failed on the West Side Highway. Nina closed her eyes. Dad, which one do you think it is? I don't know, Nina. I haven't seen Adrian Moretti in 16 years. I don't know what kind of man he became. But I will tell you this. Whichever one it is, the calculator or the orphan, you cannot let him think you are afraid of him. Men like that smell fear, like sharks smell blood. You go in tomorrow morning and you do your job and you tell him the truth about every document he hands you. And you do not under any circumstance let him see you flinch. Dad, he scares me. I know, sweetheart. He really scares me. I know. She sat with him for a long time after that on the ottoman by his chair the way she used to sit when she was a little girl. He stroked her hair with his shaking hand. Neither of them said anything for a while. Eventually he said, Nina. Yeah, Dad. Tell me about the Bertolini contract again. The clause about the arbitrator. She told him. He listened, his eyes half closed the way he always listened. When she was finished, he made a small, satisfied sound in his throat. You did good work today, Nina Bear. Dad, I might have gotten myself killed today. No, you know, he said gently. If Adrian Moretti wanted you dead, you would already be dead. He has a use for you. We just need to figure out what it is before he uses you up. She slept badly that night. She dreamed of Italian men with silver hair in conference rooms with no doors, and her father sitting in a witness stand looking very old and very alone. She woke at 5:45 in a cold sweat, and she lay in bed staring at the ceiling for 10 minutes before she made herself get up. At 7 o'clock sharp, a black town car pulled up outside her apartment building. The driver, a heavy-set man in his 50s with a gray mustache, opened the rear door for her. Miss Whitmore, I'm Salvatore. I'll be driving you from now on. From now on? Yes, ma'am, Mr. Moretti's instructions. Every morning at 7, every evening at whatever time you finish. Nina got into the car. The leather was soft. The interior smelled of expensive cologne and faintly of cigar smoke. She set her bag on the seat beside her and watched the city slide past the tinted windows. Salvatore, she said carefully after a few minutes. How long have you worked for Mr. Moretti? 22 years, Miss Whitmore. So you knew his father? There was a small pause. Salvatore's eyes flicked up to the rearview mirror. They met hers for a moment. Yes, ma'am. I drove for Mr. Lorenzo before. What was he like? Another pause. Longer this time. He was a good man, Miss Whitmore. The best man I ever worked for. Adrian is, he hesitated. Adrian is his father's son, in some ways, in other ways he is not. Nina looked at the back of Salvatore's head. She did not press him further. When they arrived at the building, a different floor was waiting for her. Not the lobby, not the temp pool, the 32nd floor. A young woman in a pearl gray suit was waiting at the elevator door. Miss Whitmore, I'm Hannah. I'll be your assistant. My assistant. Yes, ma'am, Mr. Moretti has set up your office. Please follow me. Nina followed her down a corridor she had never been allowed on before, past glass doors and oil paintings and a frosted glass conference room she had never seen the inside of. They stopped at a heavy walnut door with a brass nameplate already mounted on it. Nina Whitmore, Director of Linguistic Operations. Nina stared at the nameplate. Director of Linguistic Operations, she said slowly. Yes, ma'am. Mr. Moretti coined the title himself. The office inside was larger than her bedroom. There was a polished desk. There was a leather chair. There was a window looking out over the river. There was a small espresso machine on a side table, and beside it a fresh bouquet of white roses with a small card. Nina opened the card. Welcome, Miss Whitmore. The first contract is on your desk. I'll see you at noon. A.M. The contract was thick, 82 pages in Russian. Nina sat down. She picked it up. She began to read. It took her until 10:30 in the morning to get through it. She made notes. She flagged 17 separate clauses. She found 3 clauses that were, in her professional opinion, deliberately misleading. One of them was, in her professional opinion, an attempt to commit a crime under U.S. federal law. At 11:55, Hannah knocked on her door. Miss Whitmore, Mr. Moretti is ready for you. She walked down the corridor with her notes in her hand. Her heels clicked against the hardwood. She did not allow herself to think about how strange it was after 8 months of being invisible to walk down this hallway without a coffee tray. Adrian was waiting in his office. He stood up when she came in. He was wearing a dark navy suit, no tie, and he looked, Nina thought, slightly tired around the eyes, as if he had also slept badly. Miss Whitmore. Sir. Sit, please. Coffee. No, thank you. He sat back down. He folded his hands on the desk. Tell me about the Volkov contract. Nina did not sit. She remained standing and she opened her notebook. Mr. Moretti, before I begin, I need to ask you a question. His eyebrow lifted. Already. Yes, sir. All right, ask. She drew a breath. Sir, did you know my father? Adrian Moretti did not blink. He did not move. For a long moment, he simply looked at her across the desk, and then very slowly he leaned back in his chair. Yes, Miss Whitmore, I knew your father. How well, sir? Well enough. Sir, did you hire me because of him? Adrian was silent for a long time. He looked, Nina thought, almost amused, almost sad. It was hard to tell with him. Miss Whitmore, sit down. I'd rather stand, sir. Sit down, please. She sat. He stood up. He walked to the window. He stood there for a long moment, his hands in his pockets looking out at the river. When he spoke, his voice was different than it had been the day before. Quieter, more careful. Almost, Nina thought, but could not quite believe, almost gentle. Your father, Miss Whitmore, was the only honest man my father ever worked with. Did he tell you that? He told me they were friends, sir. They were more than friends. Your father saved my father from prison 3 different times between 2003 and 2010. Not by lying, by making sure my father's contracts were too clean to prosecute. He kept Lorenzo Moretti out of jail by making him an honest businessman. Did he tell you that? No, sir, he didn't. He's a humble man. That's one of the reasons I respected him. Adrian turned from the window. His charcoal eyes were unreadable. When my father died in 2010, I was 18 years old. Your father was one of the few people who came to the funeral. He sat in the back. He didn't say anything to anyone. He stood by the grave for a long time after everyone else had left. I watched him from my car. I have never forgotten it. Nina did not know what to say. 4 years later, your father testified against my Uncle Carmine in federal court. The Marcellus case. His testimony was instrumental in Carmine's conviction. My uncle died in prison. Sir, my father had no choice. The subpoena. I know about the subpoena. I read the court records. I read your father's testimony. 3 times, actually. He never lied. He never embellished. He gave the court exactly what they asked for and not one syllable more. He walked back to his desk. He sat down. Miss Whitmore, my uncle Carmine, had my father killed. The room went very still. Sir, it was never proven. It will never be proven. But I knew it then, and I know it now. My uncle ordered the brakes on my father's car cut on the West Side Highway in October of 2010. And 4 years later, when your father's testimony helped put my uncle behind bars, I sent him a thank you letter. Anonymously. He never knew it was from me. Adrian folded his hands. So no, Miss Whitmore, I did not hire you out of revenge. I did not hire you because I wanted leverage over Frank Whitmore's daughter. I hired you because I have spent the last 16 years looking for someone with your father's particular gift for reading the truth in language. And when I found out that Frank Whitmore had a daughter who had inherited that gift, I made sure she was working in my building where I could see her, where I could test her, and where eventually I could give her the job she deserved. Nina's throat was very tight. Sir, she whispered, that's a very long way to go just to hire a translator. Adrian smiled. It was not the knife-edged smile from the day before. It was a smaller smile, a more tired one, a more human one. Miss Whitmore, he said, I am not just hiring a translator. I have been waiting for a very long time to clean up what my uncle did to this family, to do what my father wanted to do before they killed him. He looked at her steadily. I need someone honest, Miss Whitmore. Someone who will tell me the truth even when I don't want to hear it. Someone whose father taught her how to read between the lines. The Morettis have been a dirty family for 40 years. I intend to make us a clean one, and I cannot do it alone. He paused. Will you help me? Nina sat in her chair, her notes about the Volkov contract still unread on her lap, and stared at Adrian Moretti across the polished walnut desk. She thought of her father. She thought of Lorenzo Moretti dead on the West Side Highway. She thought of Carmine Moretti dead in a federal prison. She thought of Salvatore, the driver who had said Adrian is his father's son. In some ways. In other ways, he is not. She thought of the Italian's words in her ear. You have made enemies. She thought of her father's voice. Powerful men do not give power away. They lend it. And she opened her mouth to give the only answer she could give. But before a single word came out, the door of the office burst open without a knock, and Vivienne, the attorney, rushed in her face white as paper. Her phone clutched in her hand. Adrian. Vivienne, I'm in a meeting. Adrian, it's Bertolini. He's just landed at JFK. He didn't fly back to Milan. He's coming here. He's coming here right now, and he's not alone. Adrian Moretti's face changed. In a single second, the man who had just spoken to Nina about cleaning up his family's name was gone. In his place was the man Nina had seen on her first day in the elevator, the one who had made the airdrop 10 degrees. How many? Adrian said quietly. 6 men, sir. Maybe more. They're in 3 black SUVs. They left the airport 10 minutes ago. Adrian stood up. He buttoned his suit jacket. His eyes flicked to Nina, and for a half second, something passed across his face that Nina did not entirely understand. It might have been concern. It might have been calculation. It might have been both. Miss Whitmore, he said, stay in this office. Lock the door behind me. Do not open it for anyone who is not me. Do you understand? Nina was already standing. Sir, what is happening? Miss Whitmore, do you understand? Yes, sir. He walked past her toward the door. Vivienne followed. At the threshold, Adrian paused. He did not turn around. He just spoke quietly over his shoulder. I told you yesterday, Miss Whitmore. You cost the Bertolini family $400 million. He stepped through the door. It appears they would like that money back. The door closed behind him, and Nina Whitmore, alone in the office of a man whose father had been murdered, for trying to be honest, pressed the lock on the heavy walnut door with hands that would not stop shaking. Nina pressed her back against the locked door and tried to remember how to breathe. Her hands were shaking so hard she could not have held a coffee cup if her life depended on it. Her father's voice was running through her head like a broken record. Powerful men do not give power away. They lend it. Powerful men do not give power away. They lend it. She had been working for Adrian Moretti for less than 24 hours, and she was already locked in his office, while 6 Italian men in 3 black SUVs drove across Manhattan to demand $400 million from a man whose uncle had murdered his father. She pulled out her phone with trembling fingers. She wanted to call her father. She wanted to hear his voice. She wanted him to tell her this was all a misunderstanding, that everything was going to be fine, that she could come home and he would make her tea and they could pretend none of this had happened. But she did not call him. Because if she called him, he would worry. And if he worried, his hand would tremble worse, and his sleep would be ruined, and tomorrow he would refuse to take his afternoon medication because he would be too proud to admit he had spent the night awake. So she put the phone away. She pressed her fist against her mouth, and she made herself think. She had been told to stay in the office. She had not been told to stay useless. She walked back to the desk. She opened her notebook. She picked up the Volkov contract, the 82-page Russian document she had spent the morning translating, and she set it carefully aside. Then she pulled up the chair, turned on the desk lamp, and started looking at every other piece of paper Adrian Moretti had left on his desk. She was going to learn this man's business. She was going to learn it now. Because the Italian men were coming, and she did not know if Adrian was going to come back through that door alive. And if he didn't, she needed to understand what kind of mess she was sitting in the middle of. She read for 35 minutes. She read shipping manifests. She read board memoranda. She read 3 different contracts in 3 different languages. She read a financial summary that made her stomach flip. Moretti Imports and Logistics had $2 billion in active port acquisitions across the Mediterranean, and Adrian had personally signed off on every single one of them in the last 18 months. She was halfway through a confidential memo about something called the Genoa Initiative when she heard the elevator ding at the end of the hallway. Footsteps, multiple sets, hard-soled men's shoes on hardwood. Nina froze. She heard voices. Adrian's voice, low and controlled. Vivienne's voice, sharp and clipped. And then a third voice, older, with a heavy Italian accent. Signor Bertolini. She could not make out the words. She heard them moving toward the conference room next door. She heard the heavy door of the conference room open and close. She heard faintly the muffled sound of voices through the wall. She put down the memo. She walked very quietly to the wall that separated Adrian's office from the conference room. She pressed her ear against it. She could hear nothing. The walls in this building were too thick. Of course they were. The walls in the office of a man like Adrian Moretti would not be the kind of walls you could eavesdrop through. She pulled back. She thought for a moment. Then she remembered something her father had once told her on a warm evening in his office at NYU while they were going over a case study about a corporate fraud involving a wiretap boardroom. The smartest men, Nina, do not bug rooms. They bug ventilation systems. Every modern office building has a return air vent that connects multiple rooms. If you want to know what's being said 2 doors down, find the vent. Nina looked up. The vent was in the ceiling above the bookshelves on the wall she shared with the conference room. She pulled a chair over to the bookshelf. She climbed up. She pressed her ear against the metal grating. The voices came through clearly. $400 million, Mr. Moretti. That is the figure my family had projected from this acquisition. You have, with respect, embarrassed us. Bertolini. With respect, Signor Bertolini, you tried to defraud me with a contract written in 2 different languages. Adrian. Cold. Steady. Mr. Moretti, please. The translation discrepancies were minor. The translation discrepancies were criminal, and I have a witness who is willing to testify in any court of your choosing to the specific words you used in Italian to describe my supposed ignorance. A pause, then Bertolini's voice. Softer now, more dangerous. Ah, the girl. Nina's stomach dropped. My corporate translator, Adrian said evenly. Yes. Mr. Moretti, we are reasonable men. There is still a way for this deal to be salvaged. We can renegotiate. We can write a new contract. But the girl, she is a problem. She has insulted my family in front of my colleagues. There must be a gesture of good faith. A longer pause. A gesture of good faith, Adrian repeated. Surely you understand, in our culture, an apology must come from the source of the offense. The girl must come to Milan. She must speak with the family. She must explain herself. And then perhaps we can move forward. Nina's blood went cold. There was no version of that sentence in which she went to Milan and came back to New York alive. She knew it. Adrian knew it. Bertolini knew it. The whole sentence was a coffin built out of Italian politeness. She waited for Adrian's answer. It took him a long time to give one. When he did, his voice had a flatness to it that Nina had never heard before. Not even in the elevator on her first day. Signor Bertolini, he said, let me explain something to you very carefully so there is no misunderstanding between us. The girl, as you call her, is mine. I beg your pardon. The girl is mine. She works for me. She is under my protection. She does not go to Milan. She does not speak with your family. She does not explain herself. If you wish to renegotiate the Genoa deal, you renegotiate it with me in this room today. Otherwise, you may leave my building and you may take your insults back to your family with my regards. A long, brittle silence. Then Bertolini very softly, you are making a serious mistake, young man. Then I'll make it. The door is behind you. Nina heard chairs being pushed back. She heard footsteps. She heard the heavy conference room door open, and then she heard the steady, unhurried tread of 6 Italian men walking down the hallway and getting into the elevator. The elevator dinged. The doors closed. Silence. Nina climbed down from the chair. Her legs were jelly. She stood in the middle of Adrian Moretti's office, holding onto the back of his desk chair, and she tried to slow her breathing. A minute later, there was a soft knock on the door. Miss Whitmore? It's me. She unlocked it. Adrian Moretti walked in. He looked, Nina thought, exactly the same as he had 10 minutes ago. The same dark suit, the same calm face, the same level eyes, but there was something new at the corner of his mouth. A small, hard tightness, the kind a man wears when he is about to do something he has been putting off for a long time. He closed the door behind him. Miss Whitmore, are you all right? Sir, I heard. His eyebrow lifted very slightly. You heard. The vent. In the ceiling. I'm sorry, sir, Don't apologize. A faint smile. That's exactly what I would have done. Your father trained you well. Nina's throat was tight. Sir, they want me dead. They want a lot of things, Miss Whitmore. They are not going to get most of them. Sir, I cost you $400 million. Miss Whitmore. Adrian walked over to the espresso machine. He pressed a button. The machine hummed and began to grind. You did not cost me $400 million. You saved me $400 million. The Bertolini family was not going to make $400 million on the Genoa acquisition. The Bertolini family was going to take $400 million from me, and I would have signed the paper that let them do it. You stopped that from happening. The $400 million they think they are owed is the $400 million they were going to steal. That is not a debt. That is a tantrum. He poured the espresso into a small white cup. He brought it to her. Drink. Your hands are shaking. She took the cup. She drank. The coffee was hot and bitter and good. Some of the tightness in her chest began to ease fractionally. Sir, she said quietly, what happens now? Now, Adrian said, we go to lunch. Lunch. It's 12:45. You haven't eaten. I haven't eaten. The Bertolinis will not move against us today. They are calling Milan. They are talking to old men in Sicily. They are deciding what they want to do. That decision will take at least 72 hours. We have time. Sir, I don't think I can eat. You can and you will. Get your coat, Miss Whitmore. We have a reservation. He was already walking toward the door. She did not move. He stopped halfway across the room and turned to look at her. His face softened very slightly. It was the most human she had ever seen him look. Miss Whitmore, listen to me. I know you are afraid. I would be afraid in your position, but you cannot let the fear sit in your chest. If you let it sit, it freezes you, and we cannot afford for you to be frozen. So you are going to put on your coat. We are going to walk out of this building together. We are going to be seen in public having lunch at a restaurant where every member of every important family in this city eats. And by the time we are finished with our meal, every old man in every dark room in this city will know that Nina Whitmore is under the protection of Adrian Moretti. And then, Miss Whitmore, the people who are thinking about hurting you will think twice. Do you understand? She nodded slowly. Yes, sir. Good. Coat. She got her coat. The car ride to the restaurant was silent. Adrian did not look at his phone. He did not make calls. He did not work. He simply sat in the back of the car with her, his hands folded in his lap, and he watched the city pass. Halfway there, without turning his head, he spoke. Miss Whitmore, may I ask you a question? Yes, sir. How is your father? The question caught her so off guard that for a second she could not answer. He's okay, sir. He has Parkinson's. He has good days and bad days. The medication helps. What's his neurologist's name? Dr. Patel at Mount Sinai. Adrian nodded slowly. Dr. Patel is a competent man, but he is not the best in the country. The best is Dr. Marion Holcomb at Johns Hopkins. She runs the experimental therapy program. There is a 6-month waiting list. I know, sir. I called them last year. The waiting list and the cost. There is no waiting list anymore, Miss Whitmore. Sir, I made a phone call this morning. Your father has an appointment with Dr. Holcomb on November 4th, 3 weeks from today. The cost will be handled by the company. I will have a car drive you both to Baltimore. Nina turned her head slowly to look at him. He did not look back at her. He kept his eyes on the city outside the window. Sir, she whispered, why are you doing this? Because Miss Whitmore, he said quietly, your father saved my father's life 3 times. I never had the chance to thank him. I would like to thank him now. Nina did not cry. She had not cried in front of another human being since her mother's funeral when she was 17, and she was not about to start now in the back of a town car with Adrian Moretti. But she pressed her hand against her mouth, and she looked out the other window for a long minute, and she did not trust herself to speak. When she finally could, she said, thank you, sir. You're welcome, Miss Whitmore. The restaurant was on the east side. It was the kind of restaurant where the menu had no prices and the maitre d' knew everyone by their first name. Adrian was greeted at the door like a son of the house. 2 old men at a corner table stood up and inclined their heads as he passed. Nina, walking behind him, was looked at openly by every man in the room. They were seated at a table near the window. Adrian did not pick up the menu. The Branzino, he said to the waiter. For both of us, and a bottle of the Brunello, the 2015. Yes, Mr. Moretti. The waiter vanished. Adrian folded his hands. He looked at Nina. You are doing very well, Miss Whitmore. Sir, I am pretending not to throw up. A small, real smile. That is exactly what doing well looks like. She managed a thin smile in return. Sir, may I ask you a question now? Of course. Why did you specifically send the anonymous thank you letter to my father after the Marcellus case? You could have sent a fruit basket. You could have done nothing. Why a letter? Adrian was quiet for a long moment. He swirled the water in his glass. He looked at her thoughtfully. Miss Whitmore, I was 22 years old. I had just finished business school. I had inherited a family business that I knew even then was going to take me 20 years to clean up. Your father's testimony was the first piece of public evidence that the Moretti family had ever had against my uncle. It was the first crack in the wall. I wanted him to know that there was someone in the family who was grateful, someone who understood what he had done. Why anonymous? Because if my uncle had known I was grateful to your father, my uncle would have killed both of us before the year was out. Nina's stomach turned over. Sir, your uncle is dead now. Yes, but there are other men, aren't there? Other men in the family who feel about my father the way your uncle did. Adrian did not answer immediately. He picked up his water glass. He took a slow sip. He set the glass down. Miss Whitmore, I am going to be honest with you because you have made it very clear that honesty is what you require. Yes, there are other men. My uncle had 3 sons. One of them died in 2017. The other 2 are alive, and they are not friends of the Moretti name as it currently exists under my leadership. They view me as a traitor. They view your father as the man who broke the family, and they view you now as a tool I am using against them. Are they working with Bertolini? Adrian smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Miss Whitmore, where do you think Bertolini got the courage to try to defraud me in my own conference room? The room around them seemed to dim just slightly. My cousins, Nina said slowly. My cousins. Sir, they are trying to undermine you. They have been trying to undermine me for 16 years. They are not very good at it, but they are persistent, and they have just had 400 million reasons to try harder. Sir, what are you going to do? Adrian Moretti looked at her across the table. The maitre d' was bringing the wine. The waiter was arranging silverware. The room was full of light and laughter and the muffled sound of a string quartet in the next room. And his face, Nina thought, was the face of a man who had been waiting 16 years to do something he was finally about to do. Miss Whitmore, he said softly, I am going to do what my father wanted to do before they killed him. I am going to clean the family. I am going to remove my cousins from the company. I am going to dissolve every contract Bertolini and his friends have ever signed with us. I am going to make Moretti Imports and Logistics into the legitimate corporation my father always intended it to be. And I am going to do it within the next 6 months, because if I take longer than that, I will not survive it. He picked up his wine glass. And you, Miss Whitmore, are going to help me. Nina stared at him. Sir, she said, I am one woman with a master's degree in linguistics. I can't help you do what you're describing. Yes, you can. Sir, I cannot. Miss Whitmore, every contract my cousins have ever signed for the family is in our archives. Every shipping manifest, every memorandum, every coded letter between them and the Bertolinis and the Sicilians and the Russians. Most of it is in 5 different languages. Some of it is in deliberate code. None of it has ever been read by an honest set of eyes. He set down his glass. You are the honest set of eyes, Miss Whitmore. You are the only one I have. Nina sat in silence for a long, long moment. She thought of her father. She thought of Lorenzo Moretti's car on the West Side Highway. She thought of her own life, the small, careful life she had built, the rotation of 3 blazers, the low knot in her hair, the 8 months of being invisible. She thought of the woman who had walked into that conference room yesterday morning carrying a tray of pastries, and the woman who was sitting in this restaurant tonight across from a man who was asking her to help him take down his own family. She thought of all of it, and then she thought of Adrian Moretti, 18 years old, watching her father from a parked car at his own father's funeral. And she made her decision. Sir, she said, I have one condition. His eyebrow lifted. Go on. My father will never be involved in any of this. He will never be named. He will never be contacted by anyone in your family or any other family. He will live the rest of his life in our apartment in Queens with his books and his radio, and he will die peacefully of natural causes at home. That is the condition. That is the only condition. If anything happens to him, I walk. I disappear. I take everything I have learned about the Moretti family with me, and I disappear. Adrian Moretti looked at her for a long moment. Then he raised his wine glass. Miss Whitmore, he said, you have my word. She raised her glass. They drank. The waiter brought the branzino. Nina ate it. It was the best meal she had ever had in her life, and she barely tasted any of it. When they finished, when the bill had been paid, with a discreet folded note and a handshake, when they were walking back out to the car under the cold October stars, Adrian stopped on the sidewalk. He turned to her. Miss Whitmore, there is one more thing. Yes, sir. My cousins know about you now. They will not move on you immediately, but within 72 hours, one of them will try to contact you. Probably the older one, Marco. He will offer you something. Money, almost certainly. He will tell you that I am unstable. He will tell you that you are in danger working for me. He will offer to protect you, and he will ask you in exchange to give him information. Sir, what do you want me to do when he calls? Adrian smiled. It was a small, careful, dangerous smile. You're going to take the meeting, Miss Whitmore. You're going to listen to everything he says. You're going to memorize his face, his words, and the names of every man in the room with him. And then you're going to come back to me, and you are going to tell me everything. He opened the car door for her. Welcome to the Moretti family, Miss Whitmore. Nina got into the car. The door closed behind her with a heavy, expensive sound. And as the town car pulled away from the curb and merged into the slow river of yellow taxis flowing down Park Avenue, Nina Whitmore looked out the window at the bright lights of the city she had grown up in, and she understood with a quiet and certain clarity that the woman who had walked into this restaurant was not the woman who was leaving it. She was someone else now. She was not entirely sure yet whether that someone else was a hero or a villain or merely a survivor. She supposed she would find out soon enough. The call came on Friday morning, exactly 52 hours after the dinner. Nina was at her desk halfway through a Russian shipping manifest when her office phone rang with a number she did not recognize. She let it go to voicemail. It rang again. She let it go again. The third time she picked up. Nina Whitmore. Miss Whitmore. A man's voice, smooth, older, faintly accented. My name is Marco Moretti. I believe my cousin has mentioned me. Nina's hand tightens round the receiver. Mr. Moretti, how did you get this number? Miss Whitmore, please. We're family now. I have all the numbers. She did not laugh. What can I do for you, Mr. Moretti? I'd like to take you to lunch today. There's a small place in the village. Quiet, private. I think you and I have a great deal to discuss. She closed her eyes. She heard Adrian's voice in her head. You're going to take the meeting, Miss Whitmore. What time? 1 o'clock. I'll send a car. I'll take a cab, Mr. Moretti. Thank you. A small dry laugh. As you wish. The address is 11 Bedford Street. Don't be late. He hung up. Nina set the receiver down very carefully. Her hand was steady, which surprised her. She had expected it to shake. She walked down the hallway to Adrian's office. She knocked once. She opened the door without waiting. He was on a phone call. He looked up. He took in her face. He said into the phone, I'll call you back. And he hung up. He called you. Yes, sir. 1 o'clock, 11 Bedford Street. Adrian nodded slowly. He picked up a pen. He wrote the address on a small notepad. He tore off the sheet. He folded it twice and put it in his jacket pocket. You will go, he said. You will eat. You will say very little. You will let him talk. He likes to talk. When he offers you money, you will not refuse and you will not accept. You will tell him you need time to think. You will ask him for 48 hours. You will leave. Yes, sir. Salvatore will drive you. He will wait outside the entire time. If you are inside for more than 90 minutes, he will come in for you. Do you understand? Yes, sir. Adrian stood. He walked around the desk. He stopped in front of her. For one strange, suspended moment, Nina thought he was going to take her hand. He didn't. He just looked at her with those charcoal eyes and he said, Miss Whitmore, I want you to listen to me very carefully. Marco Moretti is not a stupid man. He is a cruel man. He will say things to you that are designed to make you doubt me. Some of them will sound very persuasive. He will probably tell you that I had something to do with my father's death. He will probably tell you that I am planning to discard you the moment you have served your purpose. Sir, I am asking you, Miss Whitmore, to remember one thing. Whatever he tells you, whatever it is, you will hear it from me first if it is true, and you will hear it from him only if it is a lie. That is the agreement between us. Do you accept it? She looked up at him. Yes, sir, she said quietly. I accept it. He nodded once. Then go. The restaurant on Bedford Street had no sign. There was just a small wooden door and an Italian flag in the window. Salvatore parked across the street. Nina got out of the car. The October wind cut through her coat. She walked to the door and pushed it open. A maitre d' looked up. Miss Whitmore, Mr. Moretti is expecting you. He led her to a back room. There was one table. 3 men were sitting at it. Nina recognized Marco Moretti immediately. He looked enough like Adrian to be unsettling. The same dark hair, the same jawline, the same charcoal eyes. But where Adrian's stillness had a coiled, watchful quality, Marco's stillness had something dead in it, like a snake on a rock. He stood when she entered. The other 2 men did not. Miss Whitmore, so glad you could come. Please, sit. She sat. She did not extend her hand. He did not seem to expect her to. This is Tony. This is Vincent. They will not be joining our conversation. They are simply here to ensure our privacy. She nodded at the 2 men. Neither of them nodded back. Wine, Marco asked. No, thank you. Coffee? No, thank you. A small smile. You are a careful young woman, Miss Whitmore. I appreciate that. I do. He sat back. He folded his hands. I'll come straight to the point. My cousin Adrian is a very dangerous man. He is dangerous to himself. He is dangerous to his employees. He is particularly dangerous to anyone who has come to know more about the Moretti family business than they were ever meant to know, which Miss Whitmore now includes you. Mr. Moretti, please let me finish. You are, I'm told, an exceptionally intelligent woman. I am here to offer you a way out, a clean way out, $2 million in a private account of your choosing anywhere in the world, a new identity if you'd like one, safe passage out of the country, all in exchange for one simple thing. He leaned forward. Everything you have learned about Adrian's plans for the family, every contract you have read, every name you have memorized, every word he has said to you about his cousins, about me. Nina kept her face perfectly still. That's a lot of money, Mr. Moretti. It is. Why is it worth that much? Marco smiled. The smile did not reach his eyes. Because Miss Whitmore, my cousin, is preparing to do something very foolish, and he believes you are going to help him do it. I would prefer that he not have your help. With your help, he might succeed. Without your help, he will fail. Failure is much cleaner. Failure can be managed. Success would force me into a much more permanent solution. Nina took a slow breath. She thought of Adrian's words. He likes to talk. Mr. Moretti, may I ask you a question? Of course. Did you have anything to do with Lorenzo Moretti's death? The smile slid off Marco's face. The two silent men at the table shifted in their chairs. That, Marco said softly, is a question that has gotten people killed in this family, Miss Whitmore. I'd still like an answer. My uncle Lorenzo died in a car accident 16 years ago. The brakes failed. There was an investigation. The investigation found nothing. That's not what I asked Mr. Moretti. He stared at her. For a long, long moment, he did not move at all. Then he laughed. It was a small, unpleasant laugh. The laugh of a man who has just decided in real time to recalibrate his estimate of who he is sitting across from. Miss Whitmore, you really are Frank Whitmore's daughter, aren't you? Yes, Mr. Moretti, I am. My father had a great deal of respect for your father. Did you know that? My father has not mentioned your father, Mr. Moretti. My father has been very careful not to mention any of you. Smart man. Yes. He picked up his wine glass. He swirled it slowly. All right, Miss Whitmore, you want honesty. I'll give you honesty. My father, Carmine, did order the brakes cut on Lorenzo's car. That is true. I knew about it at the time. I did not stop it. That is also true. Lorenzo was a problem. He was preparing to make the family legitimate, which would have ended a great deal of business that supported a great deal of people. So the decision was made. It was a business decision. Do you understand? I understand the words you're saying, Mr. Moretti. Good. He set the glass down. Now, Miss Whitmore, Adrian has been telling himself a fairy tale for 16 years. He has been telling himself that his father was a saint. He has been telling himself that he is going to finish what his father started. He has been telling himself that he is the hero of the Moretti family. He is not. He is a young man who is trying to destroy the family that raised him because he cannot accept that his father was killed for being weak. And you, Miss Whitmore, are the latest tool in his fairy tale. He will use you, he will burn you. And when he is done, he will not protect you. Because men like Adrian do not protect their tools. They replace them. Nina watched his face. She thought of Adrian at the dinner table. Whatever he tells you, whatever it is, you will hear it from me first if it is true. Mr. Moretti, she said, may I ask you one more question? By all means. If Adrian is so weak and his plan is doomed to fail anyway, why are you offering me $2 million? The room went still. Marco's face did not change, but something in his eyes did. The dead snake stillness sharpened into something colder. Miss Whitmore, he said softly, you really are very intelligent, perhaps too intelligent. I'd like the 48 hours, Mr. Moretti, to think. Take 24. 48, a long pause. 48, he conceded. But Miss Whitmore, hear me carefully. After 48 hours, the offer disappears, and what replaces it will not be an offer. She stood up. Thank you for lunch, Mr. Moretti. You haven't eaten. I lost my appetite when you confessed to being an accessory to murder, Mr. Moretti. I'm sure you understand. She walked out. She did not allow herself to run, although every nerve in her body wanted to. She walked at a steady pace through the small dining room, past the maitre d', out the wooden door across the cold sidewalk, into the back of Salvatore's town car. Drive, she said. He drove. 2 blocks away, she finally let herself shake. By the time she got back to the office, she had stopped shaking. She walked into Adrian's office without knocking. He took one look at her, face ended his phone call, and stood up. Tell me, she told him. Everything. Every word. The $2 million, the threat, the casual confession to being an accessory to his father's murder. The way Marco had looked at her when she had asked the question he had not been expecting. Adrian Moretti sat in his chair while she spoke. He did not move. He did not interrupt. When she was finished, he sat in silence for a long, long moment, his hands folded under his chin. Then he said, he confessed. He confessed, sir. To you, specifically, in a private dining room with 2 witnesses present. Yes, sir. A slow smile spread across Adrian Moretti's face. It was the smile Nina thought of a man who had been waiting 16 years to hear something and had just heard it. Miss Whitmore, were you wearing the silver pen I gave you on Tuesday? She blinked. The pen? In your jacket pocket, the silver pen with the small black band near the cap. Yes, sir, I was. Miss Whitmore, that pen is a recording device. It has been recording continuously since the moment you put it in your pocket this morning. Nina's mouth fell open. Sir, I'm sorry I didn't tell you. If you had known, your face would have given it away. I needed his confession to be unforced. And it was. Sir, that recording, is it admissible? Adrian's smile widened. In a New York court, yes, Miss Whitmore. New York is a one-party consent state. You consented to the recording by carrying the pen. His confession is fully admissible. He stood up. He walked around the desk. He held out his hand. The pen, please. She handed it to him. He held it for a long moment. Then very quietly he said, 16 years, Miss Whitmore. 16 years I have been waiting for one of them to admit it out loud. To anyone. They never did. They were too careful. And then you walked in there with your father's particular gift and you asked him a single question and he handed it to you in 3 sentences. He looked up at her. Your father would be very proud. Nina did not trust herself to speak. What happened over the next 6 weeks happened very quickly. Adrian did not go to the police. He did not need to. He used the recording the way a chess master uses a pin piece. He met privately with the surviving men of the Moretti family council. He played them the recording. He explained calmly that Marco had now created a liability that endangered every man in the room. He proposed a vote. The vote was unanimous. Marco Moretti was removed from the family, permanently. He was placed under what the council politely called extended supervision at a property in Sicily where he would live out the rest of his life without access to a phone, a computer, or the family business. His brother Vincent, the older one, took the deal Marco had refused. He retired. He moved to Florida. He never spoke to a Moretti again. Within 90 days, every cousin who had been working against Adrian was either retired, relocated, or dead. None of them died at Adrian's hand. 2 of them died of perfectly natural causes that Nina did not ask any questions about. Bertolini's family quietly withdrew their objection to the canceled Genoa deal. They returned the deposit. They never spoke to Moretti Imports and Logistics again. The board of Moretti Imports and Logistics voted in early December to formally restructure the company as a fully publicly audited corporation. The vote was unanimous. The press release said it was a milestone in modern corporate transparency. Nobody outside the family knew what it had cost. On the 3rd week of November, Nina drove with her father to Baltimore. They stayed in a hotel paid for by the company. Dr. Marion Holcomb saw her father for 2 hours. She put him in the experimental therapy program. She told Nina that with the new protocol, her father's tremor could potentially be reduced by 60% within 6 months. Nina cried in the lobby of the hotel that night alone for 20 minutes. She had not cried since her mother's funeral. It was the first time she had cried since. The day after Thanksgiving, Adrian called her into his office. Miss Whitmore, sit please. She sat. I want to make you a permanent offer. Sir, you have over the past 3 months helped me dismantle a 40-year-old organized crime structure and replace it with a legitimate corporation. You have read 16 languages worth of contracts, decoded 11 different ciphers, and identified 4 separate fraud schemes I would never have caught on my own. You have done all of this while caring for a sick father, and you have done it while every man in this city was wondering whether you would survive the year. He folded his hands. I would like to offer you the position of Chief Operating Officer of Moretti Holdings, the new entity, full equity partnership, full transparency, full board recognition. You would be the first person outside the family in 4 generations to hold an executive position at this company. Frankly, you have earned it 3 times over. Nina sat very still. Sir, she said, I am 26 years old. Yes, Miss Whitmore, and the men who built this country were younger than you when they did it. Age is not a qualification. Competence is. Sir, may I think about it? You may have as long as you need. She thought about it for 3 days. She thought about it on the long subway ride from Queens. She thought about it sitting next to her father, who was reading more comfortably now that his hand had stopped shaking quite so much. She thought about it at her mother's grave on Saturday morning, where she stood in the cold and talked to the woman she had not been able to talk to for 9 years. She thought about it finally in the small kitchen of her father's apartment on Sunday evening while her father made tea. Dad? Yes, Nina Bear. He offered me a partnership, chief operating officer. I know, sweetheart. He called me last week. She turned around. He called you. He came to see me, actually, 2 weeks ago while you were at work. Dad, you didn't tell me. I wanted you to make the decision yourself. She sat down at the kitchen table. Her father set down a cup of tea in front of her. He sat across from her. He took her hand. He came to ask my permission, Nina Bear. Not for the bomb. The bomb is yours. He came to ask my permission to court you. The teacup clattered against the saucer. To Dad. He told me very plainly that he had developed feelings for you over the past 6 months that were inappropriate to act on while he was your employer. He told me that he intended to give you the partnership offer regardless of your answer to the personal question. He told me that if you took the partnership but rejected him personally, he would never bring it up again and he would respect your decision for the rest of his life. Nina's mouth had gone completely dry. Dad, what did you tell him? Frank Whitmore looked at his daughter. The tremor in his hand was small now. His blue eyes were soft. I told him, Nina, that you were not mine to give. I told him that he could ask you himself. And I told him that if he ever caused you a single moment of harm, your father might be old, but your father had testified before, and your father would testify again. She started to laugh. She started to cry. She did both at once, sitting at the smallest kitchen table in the apartment in Queens where she had grown up. Her father reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Nina Bear, listen to me. What you do next is your decision. The children, the man, all of it. I will support you no matter what you choose. But I want you to know one thing, Shaw. What, Dad? Lorenzo Moretti was the most decent man I ever worked with. Adrian is his son. I have watched him very carefully for the last 6 weeks, and I believe in my heart that he is his father's son, not his uncle's. There is a difference, and it matters. She went back to the office on Monday morning. She walked into Adrian Moretti's office at 8:45. She did not knock. He looked up. He stood. Miss Whitmore. Mr. Moretti, I accept the partnership. He nodded once. I'm glad. And Mr. Moretti? Yes. My father told me that you went to see him. A faint flush touched the edge of his face. It was the most human she had ever seen him look. Miss Whitmore, Sir. She held up a hand. Before you say anything else, I want to tell you something. I have spent my entire life learning to read between the lines, to find the truth that men hide in their language, to catch the small word that gives away the lie. And in 6 months, sir, I have read more of you than you probably realize. He waited. You are not a kind man, Master Moretti. You are not a soft man. You have done things in the building of this new company that I do not ask about and do not want to know about. But you are an honest man when honesty is offered to you. You kept your word about my father. You kept your word about the company. You kept your word about everything you ever told me. And in a world like the one I have been living in for 6 months, sir, that is not nothing. That is, in fact, the only thing that matters. She walked toward his desk. My answer is yes, Mr. Moretti, to the partnership, and to the other question, the one you have yet asked me. My answer to that, when you ask it, will also be yes. Adrian Moretti looked at her for a long moment. Then, for the first time since Nina Whitmore had met him, he smiled with his whole face. Miss Whitmore, he said softly, you really do read between the lines, don't you? Yes, sir, she said. I really do. A year later, the woman who had once been told to be invisible sat at the head of a boardroom in a building she half-owned, in a city that had once tried to swallow her whole with the man she had once been afraid to look at, sitting at her right hand, and her father, his tremor reduced by 70%, watching from the back of the room. With quiet, proud eyes, the contract on the table was 43 pages long and written in 3 languages, and Nina Whitmore read it cover to cover. And there was not a single hidden word in it, because nobody anywhere in the world was foolish enough to try and hide a word from her anymore. The mafia boss had laughed at her once and said, if you're so smart, then translate it. She had translated it. She had translated all of it. And the woman who had been carrying a coffee tray on a Tuesday morning in October was now the woman who decided which contracts got signed in the city of New York. That was the truth of it. That was the whole of it, and that was the end.